What's up, fam? Thanks for tuning in once again, or for the very first time. I'm Jasper the Filmy. Want you guys to know that this is going to be a spoiler full review. Yes, I will spoil this film, so make sure if you haven't seen the film, you check out my review without the spoilers. I'll put the link for it right up here. You could click on that, check it out, because if you see this, you will get spoiled. The perspective I'm going to share with you on this film is coming directly from the words and text that August Wilson wrote himself about the story, because honestly, the story that we saw produced by Denzel Washington, starring Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman, is not actually the full account of what August Wilson put together. So in this review, I'm going to talk to you guys about the symbolism from some of the things inside of the play, and talk about the play actually the way it was written by August Wilson and how this film stacks up, and ultimately in general just how good this story is completely. I definitely got to give kudos to Mr. Wolf, Denzel Washington, everybody that was a part of this project, because this isn't, you know, your typical film. Obviously, in normal circumstances, it's not easy to put together a film about a play that was previously recorded or on Broadway or any type of stage presence, because a lot of times what filmmakers go through is sacrificing parts of the story to make it work in the cinematic space, and that's not an easy thing to do. And not only are they doing a play, they're actually doing a play that was written by arguably one of the best playwrights of all time, August Wilson. And August Wilson is a really strong dialogue guy. I mean, everything in his plays has meaning. Every conversation, every sentence, every word practically has meanings to it. So whenever you cut out things from August Wilson's plays in dialogue context, a lot of times you're risking the fact of changing the theme and changing the story. Well, leads me to the first point. This film and the August Wilson play actually in the end came out with two different themes. They have the central idea that is similar, but due to the fact that there was some changes in the script with the film compared to what August Wilson wrote for the play, it ends up kind of changing the focus of the story. And I could safely say this because if you go on Netflix and you watch the behind the scenes talk with, you know, Viola, Denzel, and everybody else that was in there, Mr. Wolf, you guys hear from them directly their interpretations of their characters, their interpretation of the story, and ultimately you even hear directly from Mr. Wolf, the director, exactly his thoughts on, you know, where the story was and where he would like for it to go. And when you read the play, obviously you kind of see some differences. One of the biggest things that stuck out to me, which was an obvious difference, was the end of the play, where towards the end of the film, excuse me, you saw this part where Chadwick, playing Levy, actually goes into this room, and there's literally nothing in the room. And obviously it's symbolizing, like Mr. Wolf said in the behind the scenes, the reality of trying to break through with racial oppression and everything else. There's nothing on the other end. But the reality is, in the play, that did not happen. And also the symbolism of the room that they were practicing in is one of the reasons why it's different from the film. So if you go into the film, we see these guys practicing in the room, and then they have a conversation amongst each other talking about, you know, how things have changed. And then you see Chadwick, playing Levy, bumps into this door, and he says, damn, all these things have changed around.
Change things around? I'll never leave well enough alone.
Well, everything changing all the time, even the air you breathe.
If you look in the play, he does talk about that door, but they actually cut off some pivotal parts about it. There's a conversation that happens between Toledo and Chadwick, and everybody practically talking about how the room is different. And Levy talks about literally how the room was once upstairs, and then it moved, and then it moved, and then it moved. And this is actually a symbolic conversation of the value of the band members, which goes even deeper into the value of African Americans and the men that are there. So the symbolic meaning that August Wilson had in the play for the control room, the studio room, and the band room, which moved to the basement, was representing pretty much everyone in their place. If you pay close attention to the film, they try to touch on this a little bit, but if you look at its Irvin and Studevant they're actually always up in the control room, always up in the studio area. Then Rainey is always in the studio area. There's one little segment where she goes down into the basement to introduce Sylvester, her nephew, to the band members, but she doesn't stay in there very long. And then the band members are in the basement, and in the play they talk about how the room was moved because the room that they were in, which was in the basement, wants to be the equipment room where they held the horns and the cords and everything else. And see, in the film they don't talk about that. And one of the reasons why I know they did not go into that direction is because if you pay close attention to the words of Mr. Wolf, he emphasizes, his interpretation of, Levy and going through what he was going through in the story. He wanted to emphasize this young guy that just pretty much thought he can make a breakthrough to see that there was no breakthrough at all, which is part of the story. That is part of the story, but the reality is there was actually a deeper meaning that August Wilson had intended for Levy, as well as the three men. See, the three men that were in that band represented practically three different types of African-American males. You have the older guy, Toledo, which is really educated. He knows pretty much culture and history, and he's the only one that actually can read from the band, which actually the film does not actually touch on, which I'm not surprised by. Then you have Slow Drag. In the film, you don't learn about the purpose behind his name, but in the play, you learn the purpose behind his name. Literally, Slow Drag, he plays the bass on the Slow Drag, and then also too, he was a really good dancer, and he won the dance competition. And ever since, they kind of called him Slow Drag, but he wasn't the most intelligent person. He was pretty much kind of the guy that just wanted to kind of go along with whatever works, whatever makes sense. I just do that. And then you have Cutler, which in the film we saw him playing the trombone, but actually in the play you learn that he actually can play the guitar and the trombone, and he could cut the strings, hence the name Cutler. So literally you got this guy, these three guys, they all come from different walks of life, but they all represent three different types of African Americans. George Wolfe's interpretation of Levy and the old men and their relationship pretty much was kind of communicating the message, look, young buck, you need to learn the ropes. This is how things are going to go. And August Wilson's interpretation was pretty much saying, at the end of the day, all of them were misguided. You have Toledo, who knew a good bit, but at the same time, he didn't even know his own place. When he was talking to Levy towards the end, he was talking about how important and how valuable the white guy was by allowing them the opportunity to be an entertainer.
Is you gonna be satisfied with a bone somebody done throwed you when you done seen them eating a whole hog?
You lucky to let you be an entertainer. You're lucky you don't even know it.
When you really think about it, literally the only person that really knew their place, space, and face in the world and in the film was Ma Rainey knew her value. She spoke about it. She knew her purpose. She knew her purpose was through the blues. She knew what blues was created by. She said it in her own words. That's what helped her pretty much guide everybody and pretty much control the situation with what power she had. But the men did not know that. If you understood the purpose of August Wilson and understood the purpose of George Smith, the director of the film, you see they kind of was going in different directions. August Wilson hid the real message in the play through what Toledo was talking about as far as the African American, the colored man, trying to understand what he's going to do with himself. It was after the speech talking about the big stew. Now the big stew in the film was also cut pretty drastically as well. Understandably, we understand why it was cut, because at the end of the day in the film you don't have all day to get to the point. You gotta cut to these points and go there. So I understand that. But there was a few things that was really big in that speech. Obviously, to break down the speech, we know the stew is talking figuratively and metaphorically about America. Literally, the African Americans, are a part of this big melting pot of cultures in America. And the person that August Wilson was actually talking about through Toledo in this story was actually the white man. That's who he's saying was eating the stew and making their history. The white man came to America, made their stew with the cultures. Native Americans are an example. Also, the African Americans ate up all their benefits and moved on to the next thing. And that's something that he empowered through the message of the stew that the African American man, the colored man, needs to know that they're leftovers to first of all understand what they're doing, their place in the world, and then understand where they came from. And then once they get that awareness, understand how they can build the community together to embrace growth and moving forward. But that's something that you don't see in this story, which makes it a really interesting story. And that's something that you don't see in the film, because if you look at Toledo, you look at Slow Drag, you look at Cutler, you look at Levy, all of them pretty much was in there just doing their own thing. They were working together, but they were doing their own thing. And that's quite honestly the thing that plagues us as black men. We can come together to get stuff done, but we for some reason don't do very well when we are trying to be on the same page. And that's a message that August Wilson was communicating, that, hey, look, you know, the women, they do better with that. Matter of fact, they have the understanding of their identity.
This is important. I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Yep. It's the men that are lost in the purpose, and that's a pretty cold pill to swallow, but it's a reality. The message is real. Literally, there's an issue with the fact that there is not a sense of community amongst black men. Whenever it comes time for us to accomplish things, we will do what we got to do and find a way to tolerate each other to get things done. But at the end of the day, when it comes to us working towards the same purpose and understanding our purpose in the big picture, we don't do that. And that's the message that is also portrayed in this story, which is why it ended the way it ended. Because you see, I'm willing to argue that this story between Levy and Toledo could have actually ended on a positive term. Matter of fact, it could have been a great message that we could have seen with an older black man teaching a younger black man with pain, with sorrow and troubles, how he can navigate through this world. But we did not see that. We saw an older black man simply saying, I don't know what to do. That's a loss, and that's not necessarily a empowering truth, but it's a reality. This guy was hit twice from the white man. His mom was raped by 8 or 9 white men, literally brutally. His father was killed after retribution from raping his wife and raping his mom. And just after he has a conversation with a guy that made a promise to him, a white man, about having some music opportunities, not only was he knocked out of the picture, but he was told he has no choice. And this is a moment where he's getting hurt again. And obviously he doesn't see the picture, but Toledo should have saw that picture. He should have been able to speak up and give Levy some word of advice in a way that could have probably connected with him, but he didn't. As a matter of fact, if you pay close attention in the story, even after the story about his mom being raped, they still called him a fool. Nobody showed any condolences. Nobody showed any sympathy. What's up with that? But yet, earlier in the story, Toledo happened to be the man that came out and was talking to them about how the black man is going to need to come together and handle things and do much better. But yet, he couldn't even do it himself when the time called for it. Make no mistake, this film is talking about Ma Rainey and the work that she did as an artist, but it's not a biopic. And I have heard people right here on YouTube and other people put in their reviews about how they wanted to see more Ma Rainey, and that's understandable. But this isn't a film talking about Ma Rainey, because Ma Rainey actually is a conduit, a symbol in this film of understanding, meaning, and drive of a blues artist. And I said this actually slightly in my first review when I wasn't doing any spoilers about the understanding for the blues artists of that era. Blues artists of that era that were really, you know, powerful, really good, really had a deep connection with the messages and the tone of their songs, because blues was so much. Literally, she even says it. Blues was there before she was there. Yes, Ma Rainey was not the full focus about this story. Ma Rainey was just, like I said, a piece of it. The story could have easily been named The Tragedy of Levy or the band, because it's kind of a interesting fact that a group of musicians that are supposed to be a team could not come together and help each other. They had no voice, they had no identity, and they didn't even understand their identity. And see, having kind of this play on musicians and music and their relationship towards the story is a typical August Wilson feature. He does this a lot in all of his plays. Literally, the remarks that he makes in some of the characters, a lot of times are in conjunction to other stories. Like we hear it in this film when Levy is talking about if his father knew he could play the trumpet, he would call him Gabriel.
Me and this always tight. If my daddy had a known I was gonna turn out like this, he would have named me Gabriel.
Of course, there's a little bit of a religious backing behind that, talking about the horn of Gabriel that sounds the trumpet on Judgment Day. But also, if you look back in Fences, which August Wilson wrote and that Denzel Washington and Viola Davis did together, literally Troy was taking care of his brother Gabriel, who also played the trumpet, who was in a mental state of duress and disconnection because of the fight that he had, you know, with the army in heaven. So you see Gabriel kind of appears up in his other features that he does. We also see the same thing happen when we hear Cutler's story about Reverend Gates on the train. This is somewhat of a wordplay with the story that August Wilson wrote called Two Trains. August Wilson's plays are really spectacular. They always have some great messages that really dives deep and really brings in that idea of self-reflection for the African American community overall. And we hear about that a lot in this story, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but I would encourage you to see it firsthand by checking out some of the stories through the playbooks that are currently out there for you to read. Matter of fact, I'll add a link in the description of this video that you can click on to read a little bit about August Wilson's plays. But overall, my thoughts of the film still stands as respect and love for the cinematography and just for the art of the story in general. At the end of the day, what George did in this film was what I believe any director would do. When you have some great talent, you build an opportunity for that talent to prevail and shine in the story. What do you do when you have Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman together putting together a great story? You give them opportunities to show off their capabilities as actors so that the audience can get the best experience whatsoever. And he did that. He definitely delivered on that. And I would never ever fault him for that, because at the end of the day, it proved with the unfortunate loss of Chadwick Boseman that the history can be made just through some of the stories. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is literally a 2-act play. It's really short and the plays are not really long in general. And I think you will really gain some great insight about this story when you kind of take a look at it. And I would love to hear in the comments down there what your thoughts are about the film in comparison to the play. I would encourage you obviously to read the play first and then put in your comments, because then that kind of brings in some good discussion about the comparison about the two. I also hope that you liked this video. If you did like this video, please do me a favor, hit that like button to let YouTube know that you did like it. And if you like to stay in this journey about some of the reviews that I do on films, I traditionally put up new reviews on films on Mondays. This just was a special circumstance, so hope you hit that subscribe button as well to follow me through that journey. So until next time, capture life and create visions.